Hello, family. Welcome back to the Explore the Extraordinary podcast. My name's Betty, and today I'm joined by AJ. And AJ is a spiritual journalist. He had a near-death-like experience in the early 90s, and he's from Venezuela. And AJ and I have collaborated on a couple of different things, and I'm super excited to introduce him to our community here at IANDS and to give you some space to share about your mystical experiences. So I'm going to toss it right over to you. Thanks so much for your service.
Well, thank you, Betty. My name is AJ Parr, and I have been in this spiritual path since I was very young. When I was 34 years old, I had what I call a near-death-like experience. In the beginning, I didn't know what it was because I woke up in the middle of the night. I was in a place completely dark, pitch dark. I raised my hands to see if I could see them, and it was impossible. I couldn't see anything. So this happened once, and that day I woke up in my bed. Nothing happened. It happened twice. The following night, more or less around 3 o'clock in the morning. Then the third night, I appeared there once more, and I said, "What's going on here?" Each time I appeared there, I looked around, and since it was pitch dark, I could not see anything, but I did feel vast space surrounding me. And I also felt a presence. So that was really scary because I thought I was alone. I lived alone at the time. And when I felt this presence, I got scared. I felt, in my chest, this sensation of fear. And I thought there could be someone there in that darkness, and there was, because I heard a voice that said, "Surrender, all is one." I had already had like a oneness experience, and I decided to trust this voice, or I guess I had no choice. I simply trusted, and that feeling in my chest, I realized that it was not fear. It was my heart that was like expanding. And it expanded more, and the more I relaxed, the more it expanded. And it grew larger than me, larger than my house, larger than my country, larger than the world. And all of a sudden, I exploded, and I became light. It wasn't me anymore because I could see up, down, to the right, to the left. Everything was light, and I was like in the middle of a star, a gigantic star. And I could focus on the middle of the star and see all the rays of light in all directions spreading out. But I could also, if I focused on each ray, I could see each ray surrounded by empty space. And I could follow each ray into eternity. So that was really strange because at the same time, I could see in all directions and be close and far, and this was absolutely mind-blowing. I thought, when I came back, I thought I had been in another dimension, because in 3D, we are used to, if you're looking forward, you cannot look backwards. But here, I did. So after experiencing that darkness and feeling that sensation of oneness, I was filled with universal love, universal wisdom, universal peace. I was everything, and I was simply blown away. I did not remember I was me, and I had no thoughts. All of a sudden, when I came back to my bed, this happened during the night. When I woke up, I said, "Wow, what just happened? I can't believe it. This was strange." And I still felt like I was hemispheric, like a sphere, because that was more or less the shape that this star of light, that according to what I felt, that it occupied the whole universe. Okay, so it was gigantic. When I woke up, I felt that I was still hemispheric and that my body went further than my physical body. So what I did is I got up from my bed, since I had the feeling that I was more than me, that I also was the rest of the universe. I went up to the wall and I leaned against the wall and I pressed my hand against the wall. And I could feel that I was the hand pressing against the wall, but I was also the wall pressing back. I could feel both consciousness. So I was really, I could not explain it. This is what they call an ineffable experience. There are no words to describe it. This happened in 1991, and I could not make sense of it. So I, more or less, I asked the universe what had happened, you know? And I got this download. It was like a small poem. It was something like this. In the beginning was the one, and the one was alone, but he wanted to play. So he divided himself in two and gave number two amnesia. And thus the game began. So that practically was an explanation that we are all God. I simply understood it this way. And I guess everyone have forgotten who I am. We have all forgotten who we are. And we are that oneness. Oneness is a non-dual dimension, a non-dual universe. It's impossible to describe. But once you pass from the non-dual reality, you pass to the dual reality, then and only then multiplicity can exist. In that dimension in which God or the universal force or the universal energy inhabits, there is only one consciousness. But in this material world, in this 3D world, duality and polarity is the basis of everything. We see that in matter, the subatomic particles have positive and negative energy. Not necessarily the negative is what we say negative or bad. No, simply two poles. And humans talk about good and bad, weak and strong. So this is a dual world. And since I could not understand this in words, but I did know that I had had an experience with God, I set out to find an explanation in religion. So I had researched Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism. So I went even deeper and I started reading the scriptures. And I found in different scriptures, they talked about this light. They talked about oneness. They talked about the illusory world. This is an illusion. And I also came in contact with A Course in Miracles. And that helped me understand that this is a dream or an illusion. But it's a dream or an illusion created by God in order to give start to the game. That's the only way he could play, by dividing himself and giving himself amnesia. So that's what we're doing here. We are basically on our way back. We are remembering who we are. And I have a feeling that this is endless. We will never reach. As long as we are in this dual world, it is impossible to reach and stay in the non-dual world. You can have contacts with it briefly, but the only way to exist in this world is thanks to duality. Because, like I said, the most small particles of matter are composed of positive and negative. So these contacts, such as the one I had and such as the one many people have had through history, I think gave birth to the primitive religions and primitive spiritual path. So I started studying comparative religion for 30 years. And apart from that, I did not tell my story. I did not dare. I told my story to several people. They didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy, so I forgot about it. And I also had an experience right after I got this. I had my near-death-like experience. I thought that I would. I decided to write a book, tell the world what had happened. However, when I was writing it one night, I heard this question. It came from my heart. The question was, why? Why do I want to write this book? That's what I understood. Or why are you on the spiritual path? Only to write a book? That's what I said, understood. But as I heard the question, why, the answer came out from my heart too. It came from me, but it wasn't me. It said, because I want to write a book and be famous. So I felt so embarrassed because that wasn't the question, the answer I was supposed to give. I was supposed to answer, I want this spiritual knowledge to be a better person or to evolve. But I basically said, I want to write this book and be famous. So I got so embarrassed, I got down on my knees and I said, no, forgive me, God, I'm never going to write about this. And 30 years later, I have never written about this. I wrote over 20 spiritual books, but I have not mentioned it, but I will. Now, around 4 years ago, I had a friend who had a near-death experience. This was a female journalist. She had clinical death for 24 minutes, and she was the first person I ever met that told me that she had also been in this dark place and had been merged with the light. So I was really blown away because I had searched for 30 years in different religions, and I asked everyone, have you had this experience? And everybody told me they had never experienced something similar. But after hearing her experience, I started watching and reading NDE stories. And since I'm a journalist, I decided that I was going to start interviewing people to obtain a first-hand testimony of those people who had this. It's not the same if you watch it on YouTube. So I decided, since I have an inquisitive mind, I decided to interview people and continue writing about it. And I did find a lot of people, not all of them, because near-death experiences are very different, although they have common traits. But I did find people who were in that dark space. They call it the void. And PMH Atwater, who is a renowned researcher, was there. She had 3 near-death experiences, and other near-death experiencers that I have interviewed, also merging with the light, having 360-degree vision, having absolute knowledge of everything. I felt when I came back, or I felt that when I was there, I had all the wisdom in the universe. However, it wasn't because I knew all the answers. It was because I had no more questions. And because I was not thinking in terms of words. I simply knew the answers of everything. But it was impossible to write it down. So after that, I started, after interviewing people, I started also interviewing near-death researchers like Raymond Moody, Melvin Morse. The first one was Yvonne Kayson. Thanks to her, I was interviewing her on my YouTube channel when she asked me, have you ever had a spiritually transformative experience? I had never heard that term. I thought she was asking me, have you ever had a spiritual experience? So I said, yeah, have I? But I haven't told anyone. She said, no, you should tell me. So she set up a meeting with Ana Cecilia Gonzalez and her, and they shared, Yvonne shared that she had had 5 near-death experiences, and Ana Cecilia shared that she had had one near-death experience and several STEs. And then they said, well, it's your turn. So, well, for the first time, I told my story. And I started going to the sharing circles, and I started getting used to telling my story. And after interviewing around from 50 to 100 near-death experiencers, my conclusion is that I did have a near-death-like experience because I was in that void. I was in that light, and I have several of the common traits. And the book I wrote about NDEs is called Stairway to Heaven, 25 Near-Death Experiences about Encounters with God, Jesus, and Paradise. And I found 9 commonalities that I mentioned in that book. And the main one, the one that I have most seen, is meeting the light, an encounter with the light. That's basically my story.
Thanks for sharing, AJ. Wow, you shared so much and you shared so eloquently. It's so well said. And you know what? I love people who create conscious space for others. I think that it's so important to create a space, a podcast, a video, a vlog, a blog, whatever it is, writing books, to talk about these really large, expansive things, like asking quantum questions. What are we doing here? Who are we? Where do we come from? And really diving into that esoteric information, which is so much of what I heard you share about. And I wrote down something that you said: surrender, all is one. So I'm curious about, what is your life like day to day, knowing, like, this deep internal spiritual knowing of that we are all one, but still getting angry in traffic or hating to wait in line at the grocery store, but knowing that these people are actually all us. How does that work in your human life?
Well, my human life, I'm a writer. I'm also an editor, and I'm a writing coach. I just helped. I'm helping several NDEers, and I just published a book written by Mike Benavi, The Soul Guide. So I just helped him publish it. I help people publish their book. I help people write their books, and I'm like a book mentor. But after that, and also before that, I have been, I don't know if it's blessed. I guess it's blessed. But every now and then I have lucid dreams. I see spiritual masters. I have like tests, trials in my dreams. I have undergone initiations and many things that show me that I have not reached the end or the top of the ladder. I do not consider myself an enlightened being. No, I'm working on it every day. But I did decide to dedicate my life to creativity, to be a writer. And when I decided that, for about a year or two, I didn't make any money, or hardly any. But that's what I wanted to do. So I followed my passion. Okay. So that's one of the things I learned, that you must follow your passion. Because in this world, since it's an illusory world, if you only go after the money or the power or the fame, it will not be as satisfying as following your passion, following your roots, following that inner creativity that we all have. In my case, I love to write. I like to read, and I was also a musician. I like everything that has to do with creativity. I stopped having a regular job around 20 years ago, and I tried to be an entrepreneur many times. And I work at home, so my life is pretty great, I can say. Uh, I am always joining new religions and sects just to continue my investigation. I have received many initiations. There are many meditation techniques I have learned. I find that the main problem in religions is the following. Every time I join a group, every time I join a sect, except perhaps the A Course in Miracles, they say, no, my path is the only path. For example, I can go to a Christian church. They have so many denominations, but I can go to any of them, and I will always find them. I will always find someone saying, we are the chosen ones. We are the 144,000 that are chosen, that only us have the real truth. And I found that among Buddhists, among Hinduists, among Catholics, among Christians, Gnostics, Freemasons, and more recently in other sects that I prefer not to mention. But that is a common thing. It is like an illusion. I call it the Tower of Babel syndrome. That is, it's like the Tower of Babel. In the Bible, there's a story of the Tower of Babel. Everyone who went and worked, this was a building they built. They wanted to reach heaven. Okay, so they started building this building, and God, to prevent them from reaching heaven, made them speak in different tongues. And so since they could not understand each other, they could not continue building this tower. So many years ago, I had this idea that the tower is whatever mean we choose to reach heaven, to reach God. It can be meditation, it can be ayahuasca, it can be whatever, okay? There are many ways of reaching heaven. So what if you reach heaven, or it could be a near-death experience too. If you manage to reach heaven, the top of the tower, and meet that non-dual universe of oneness, when you come back, you will be speaking a different language. Everyone will be speaking a different language. Why? Because one person will say, I saw Buddha. The other will say, I saw Krishna. The other will say, I saw Jesus. The other will say, I saw some light beings. The other will say, I saw some angels. And depending on your culture, you will believe that what you saw is the only true. And you will say, oh, I saw Krishna. So only Krishna and Hinduism is the real religion. Or I saw Jesus, therefore I am a Christian and everybody should be Christians. No, that is the Tower of Babel syndrome. It makes us feel like we have the truth, we own the truth. But there are other religions like Zen Buddhism, which is against reaching conclusions, mental conclusions. You cannot say, this is the only path. The word path is also an illusion. Anything you can say about God, about the spiritual world, is an illusion. It's a mistake. That's why in Taoism, they say the Tao that you speak about, the Tao for them is like God. The Tao that you speak about is not the Tao. The God we speak about is not God. The Jesus we talk about is not Jesus. So that's the mistake we make. We normally think that there is a logical explanation behind faith or behind spirituality. But spirituality is a practice, not something you learn in books, not something, it's not even something that makes you a saint. No, spirituality is understanding that the present moment and oneness is all.
Thank you for sharing that. I love everything that you're saying. I love the oneness of humanity, the oneness of religion, and spiritual autonomy. That's what I hear that's what I hear you saying. It's not going to be a one size fits all, because we're down here on earth having our individual personality profiles, even the same way that not all near-death experiences are the same, not all mystical experiences are the same. You're right. It's almost like it's tailored to the person's personality, to their culture. I mean, occasionally you hear about like that cross culture stuff, but I love everything that you just shared. I think that it's really important to remember that we don't know anything. Whether
Right,
you've had a spiritual experience or you haven't, all of us are just kind of like sifting around in this big fishbowl of life, just,
right.
and I love how you talked about independent investigation. I'm like really being hungry for that. Do you find that you're searching more for spiritual understanding when you're putting yourself in different faiths and groups, or are you looking for more of a sense of community?
Well, I try to find the commonalities among them, and I also seek mystical experiences. However, I have found that most spiritual paths are not based on spiritual experiences. They are based more on ceremonies and on theory. So it's kind of hard. But like I said, even if I don't try, every once in a while I have a dream in which I will be asked questions, and I realize that I am having a contact with the spiritual world, and sometimes they pull my ears because I'm not doing things right. But in the end, there is no right and wrong. We are each doing what we are meant to do, and we are all on the same path, even if we are in different religions. But we are in the infancy of humanity. We are still like in prehistoric times. You see, some people are still, I wouldn't say animals, but more or less like beasts, especially those who foster wars and crime, and who have uh, no real meaning in life except uh, my ego, feed my ego. So but I think that we are on our way to improve humanity, and that this will take thousands of years. Um, I don't believe that humanity is going to destroy itself. I believe that just like we remember the times of Jesus 2,000 years ago, in 2,000 years, they will remember us. Oh, you remember those guys who lived in the 21st century, They will see us like, ancient Romans. But I think humanity has a long way to go.
I love thinking of that, thinking of the future generations being like, do you remember that whole Christian mythology era of the world? That was so weird. Yeah, because when does faith or religion transform into a mythology? Like I'm sure in ancient Rome, they weren't thinking like, oh, one day people are going to read these stories and think this is all make believe. So
Right.
eventually it will turn. And I love that. So, kind of based on what you were just talking about, do you have any sort of insight around the Great Awakening? Do you feel like we're in the midst of transformation? You said that you feel like it's like thousands of years away. Do you see it in your own life coming to fruition, this awakening process?
Well, yes. I think that especially regarding NDEs and regarding the internet. Everybody is sharing their experiences, and this is something that didn't happen 20 years ago. This is something new. Everybody, I think there's a new spiritual society, although there are still wars going on and everything. But right now, we have access to all the ancient books. And before, those were really hard to get. But right now, we have access to all the spiritual knowledge that I would have loved to have when I was young. And however, I see that the young generations are not really interested in this topic, maybe when they get a little bit older. But there are a lot of mystical and spiritual school, but I do notice that same problem, you know, because, for example, let's talk about channelers, okay? One channeler may say he channels Yeshua, okay? He has this message. And another channel may say, no, 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 he's not really channeling Yeshua. I am channeling Yeshua. And the others are channeling the Pleiadians and the Arcturians. And there are so many who believe that only they have the truth that it's kind of hard, because they really say, if you follow my path, you will reach enlightenment. And if you don't, you will be condemned. So it's really hard to see if this is, I think in the long run, it's good to have so many alternatives. But people have to realize that the Tower of Babel syndrome exists. I had a friend, he used to meditate, and he spent some years in Tibet with the lamas. And the lamas told him that if you are meditating and you see Jesus, Buddha, whatever, you have to remember that it is a projection of your own inner self. So people do not understand that we have a higher self. We have God within us. We are God. So that God takes form in our dreams, in our mystical visions, in our NDEs, and he takes form in a way that we can appreciate it or understand it, that's fit for us. For example, someone 5,000 years ago in the African jungle, he sees a being of light. He would say it's one of his African gods. And if he's an Eskimo in Alaska, 2,000 years ago, he never heard about Christ. And he sees this loving being full of light that we call Christ. He would give it another name, an Eskimo god. And in the past, in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, they would say it's the god Ra, the sun, or Apollo, the Greeks. So I don't believe that that these beings of light, or that the being of light we call Jesus, only exists since 2,000 years ago. No. Those beings have existed even before the rise of mankind. They have always existed, and they have received many names, and they are who look over humanity. These light beings that have been met in many different cultures and many different societies are like our guardians. They could be called angels. Some of them say they are extraterrestrials. Others say they are simply God, or workers of God. It's okay to call this light being Jesus. That's what I do. No, I believe in Jesus, but I also know that 3,000 years ago, before Jesus was born, that being of light existed, and he was not called Jesus. He does not have any name, just like God does not have a name. Why? Because the Tao that you speak about, the God that you speak about, is not the Tao, is not God, basically.
I'm really enjoying listening to you speak. You have so much knowledge, and I think that you make it really digestible. Like for me, it's easy to understand, and I think for somebody who maybe hasn't been exposed to this, you also make it very easy to understand. I feel like one of the things that happened to me after coming into spiritual awareness was this epic self-righteousness. I like how you kind of shared about how people think like my way is the only way. Everybody has to see the world the way that I see the world. And that's just not true. I think it's one more sort of manipulation of the ego, because we can also have spiritual ego too. And I think that happens to a lot of people after profound experiences, because your eyes are opened to a whole new world. And so you just think like, oh yeah, it's all got to be true. It's all got to be this way. So I just really love hearing about the integration, because that's what I hear. Like, you're very balanced in this. You sound very secure in this information. I can tell that you've done a lot of investigation and you've come to this conclusion that, there's autonomy here. And also the fact that we live inside of an illusion. I love that you touched on that. So what would you say to somebody who's having a conflict with either dealing with the idea that this is an illusion? So some people might say, well, what's the point? What's the point in caring about anything? What's the point in doing anything if we live inside of an illusion? What would you say to that?
Well, knowing that it's an illusion is not a cure for everything. Knowing that you are an actor in a play doesn't help you if you trip down and fall and you hit your head. You see, you are still, although it's a play, you are still vulnerable, and you can still be confused. But when perhaps your confusions will not be as severe, and there's also something else that happens when you realize that this is an illusion and that God is behind this, is that you start being more grateful. And this means that when you have something bad happening to you, you are able to say thanks for this calamity, because I learned, thanks for this bad lesson, because we learn by making mistakes. And everything that happens to us is ultimately good. That's really hard to understand. But we need to give thanks. Why? Because for example, right now, if I complain about anything, the other day I was more or less complaining or mentally complaining, or I was unsatisfied. Then I looked around and I saw a young man in a wheelchair. And I said, wow, I bet he would do anything to be like me. And I'm complaining? So that's when I said, no, thank you, God. Thank you. No matter what, no matter how hard, I'm better than others. I'm better off. I have many things to thank you for. This life is incredible. There are people. Well, I don't want to talk about all the terrible things that can happen to humans, but whoever is watching this must know that people your age, many of them are dead. Others are really sick and probably about to die. And if you're about to die, don't remember that life is eternal. So I think we should not complain The other day, I talked to a woman who had lost her son, and she said that at first she wanted to get mad because, she lost her son. But then all she could say was, "Thank you, God, for letting me share with my son at least during 12 years." That was the age when he died. So it's better to see the cup the half filled instead of seeing it half empty. Instead of complaining, okay, you can complain, but as soon as you find yourself or you realize that you're complaining, you should try to look for a reason to be grateful for. No matter what happens to you, it could have been worse. And no matter what happens to you, you still have so many treasures in your life. So you lost your girlfriend, your parent, there's still so many treasures.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. Especially with the example that you just gave, like a parent losing a child, it's unfathomable, the kind of pain that is. And if somebody who's undergone a loss like that can find joy in their life, then, I love the conception of that, thinking that there's some sort of saying. I won't even try to repeat it because I'll definitely butcher it all up, but like I would rather pick up the weight of my cross than carry somebody else's. Like you go into this big room and you see all these crosses and you end up picking the same cross that you walked into the room with, because we just don't know. We just don't know what other people's experiences are like. We don't know what kind of pain people are carrying around. So, I truly believe that we've designed many of the challenges in our life. And so I
Yes,
don't think that our soul designed it so that we
I agree with you.
couldn't break through.
I always remember your story, Betty, and I always remember that we had this contract before we came, just like you mentioned, or just like you found out in your near-death like experience. So it's just like you say, we are the only ones to blame.
I love that. Yeah. And I don't think that this is a story that helps me. And I don't think that my soul signed up for something that I can't handle. Again, like you said, we're actors and actresses in a play of life. It's just a movie. It's just a story. So I also loved hearing what you said. Like if somebody is close to exiting this part that they're playing, the same way that you see a regular movie, when the actor dies in the movie, that actor gets up after they yell cut, takes off their costume and goes home. And I think that it's a lot like that for us too. And I really enjoyed our time together today. I want to see if there's anything else that you'd like to share to feel more complete.
Well, basically, I invite everyone to see my YouTube channel, AJ Parr, Spiritual Journalist. And if you want to write a book, if you have had a near-death experience and you don't know how to write your book and you feel that you would like to, I can give you a free consultation. So reach out. I will help you out and see what you have. Okay. And apart from that, thank you, Betty. I really appreciate it. And I really love the series we're doing on A Course in Miracles. I hope we can continue.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, AJ. And all of your links will be in the liner notes of this episode. So please connect with AJ if you feel called to. And I'm so grateful for this space. And thank you again for serving our community at IANDS. We'll see you next time.